So for those who don't know and do not know, I quite enjoy this trading card game that Square Enix decided to publish for the Final Fantasy series. And for those of you who don't know, there's basically a re-release of the trading card game that was released in Japan, more for a worldwide launch. And they decided to just start again, basically, by printing a whole new Final Fantasy trading card game that could be used all over the world. And obviously then the tournament revenue that would generate. So we've had Opus 1 and Opus 2, which of the first set of the first two expansions. And now we're on Opus 3. Opus 1 came out last year and Opus 2 earlier this year. And now we're on Opus 3 with its delightful Sephiroth packaging. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start opening packs, going through the cards that I open, and not necessarily rate them, but at least give a bit of insight onto what they are and how they fit into the game. New card smell. So, first card is a mannequin card. So in Opus 2 there are a lot of these ones. They represent the Dissidia Final Fantasy characters, but well, copies of them. So it deals damage to your opponent, and you choose one doll forward, and you deal it 5,000 damage. That's pretty good. And for 4 cost and 8,000 power, that's not so bad. Then we have a more basic backup, the Summoner. Enters the field, you choose a summon in your break zone, and you add it to your hand. So break zone, for those who don't know, is basically the discard pile. And choosing a summon is a lot like, if you play Magic before, an instant card. You play the card, it has an effect, it goes to the break zone, or the graveyard. This is quite a useful utility card to get extra value out of the summons that you play. Next we have a Black Mage. Again, pretty standard card with Final Fantasy V. So you notice in the corner here, it has the series where the card is from. So this Black Mage art is from the Final Fantasy V. Looks like the PC remake to me in terms of the art. El, what do you think? Is that Final Fantasy V PC artwork?
Maybe Final Fantasy 3.
Well, it's Final Fantasy V.
Oh, Fantasy 5. Then yeah, I think the PC one.
PC artwork. And that one has a useful ability. So you can only have 5 backups at once. So being able to destroy your own backups is quite a useful ability. And at the same time, you choose an active forward and can destroy it. So that's one of yours, or one of your opponents. And that can be very useful for getting rid of annoying cards. Final Fantasy VII card. This one seems to power up if you have two of them in play. So, in the Final Fantasy trading card game, you can only have three of a card, a named card. Well, let me start again. 3 of a specific card in your deck. So this one is the Opus 3 WRO member. So for this one, you can have 3 of this particular card in your deck, and then when 2 or more are on the field, they gain 1,000 power and Brave. So again, for any Magic players out there, that means they are... I've now forgotten the word. But basically, when they attack, they don't exhaust themselves or
Vigilance.
tap themselves. Vigilance?
Vigilance?
I think it's vigilance.
Yeah.
I think it's vigilance. I haven't played Magic in a while. And so this one doesn't tap to attack, so it's free to block on your next turn. Very handy. But only if you have more of them. Now this is another WRO member. So if you have this symbol, it means you can play. You can only have 3 of this card in your deck, but on the field you can play as many of that card's name as you want. So bring that back with the other WRO member. If you had both of these on the field, then this one would have 7,000 power and brave, and you can tap and put this one into the graveyard, and you choose a card called WRO Commander, and it cannot be broken this turn. So it gives it a bit of a protection, basically. Way cards are destroyed in this game are by effects, such as the Black Mage from earlier, or in terms of forward, if they get to 0 power. So that can be done through power reduction effects, or it can be done through damage effects. For example, the Cannoneer. So again, this is a backup. You can only have 5 in play at one time, but you can pay 3 red mana, or crystal, or CP points, tap this card and put it and discard it, and you can deal 5,000 damage to 2 separate forwards. You can't choose the same one twice. Still, very good ability for getting down those last bits of power. So here we have a named card without that particular symbol. So the Cannoneer has the 3 symbol, which means you could have, potentially, 3 Cannoneers in play. However, Kazusa from Type 0 does not. So you can only have 1 Kazusa in play at one time. However, it has a useful ability that lets it put itself into the break zone. So if you need to get out a better backup with a better ability, you can break this one and play more. Very useful. And this one's ability, when Kazuya enters the field, each player discards 1 card from his or her hand. Very useful for getting rid of your opponent's cards, but also bad for your cards as well. Useful, for example, if you have effects that will bring stuff back from the graveyard. So in each pack there are, let me just count them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So there are 7 common cards, 3 rare cards, a heroic or legendary rarity card, and a holographic card which could be any card in the set. So at the moment our rares are Sephiroth. When he enters, so he's a 4 mana, 8,000 power forward, which is very useful. But when Sephiroth is put into the field, from the field into the break zone, so if he's destroyed or loses in combat, then you may search for a dark card named Sephiroth and add it to your hand. Now there are dark Sephiroths that have been printed before. This one is currently an Ice Sephiroth. You can tell by the light blue crystal and the symbol here. But there are dark Sephiroths before, and they did very useful abilities like, when he comes into play, destroy any backup. Very useful. Also note, he is an EX card. So you don't have life points in Final Fantasy TCG like you do in other TCGs, like Magic. Basically, you can take 7 points of damage before you lose the game. You can also be decked out, and I think that's the only 2 ways you can win/lose. So, if your opponent hits you with one of their creatures and you don't block it, you take a point of damage, and you take one of your cards and put it into the damage zone. EX abilities happen when a card goes from the top of your deck into the damage zone. And the EX ability, you can choose to trigger it, but it will trigger instantly and cannot be countered. So if I get damaged and I put this Sephiroth into my damage zone, I can then search for one dark card named Sephiroth and add it to my hand. Search is a keyword where you look through your deck for a card. Next, another Type 0 card. So, when this card enters the field, I can search for a Type 0 card. So, this is the category here. So, as I said before, you have categories like, for example, the Sephiroth card. Sephiroth is Dissidia Final Fantasy and Final Fantasy VII. And this card is a Type 0 card. So when this enters the field, you may search your deck for a forward of Type 0 or category Type 0 and add it to your hand. So as you see here, this is a backup, a forward. You can have as many forwards as you want, but only 5 backups. So getting good ones is a premium. Next is an example of a summon. So this also has an EX ability, but you can also just pay for it from your hand. So for this card, you choose one of their forwards, or choose one of your forwards, and deal it 7,000 damage. If you control a job class of 0 Cadet, usually a Type 0 category card, then you deal 8,000 to the character you've targeted instead. Useful ability, good little burn card. Next we've got a couple of hero cards. So in the first pack we have a card called Guido from Final Fantasy V, and we have Phoenix from Final Fantasy VII. So Phoenix is a summon card with very useful ability indeed. So you can choose a forward of cost 2 or less in your break zone and play it onto the field, and then you deal 2,000 damage to all the forwards your opponent controls. So if there's been a lot of combat in the turn, you can play this card to finish off a lot of your opponent's forwards. On the other hand, we've got this backup, Guido. He is a water elemental, like Phoenix is a fire elemental. So Guido does not activate during your active phase. So, like Magic, you will tap and untap, or in this card game, exhaust and activate. When I say exhaust, it means turn on the side to show it's been exhausted, and activate it does that. And it has a very useful ability of being able to put a card of cost 5 or more, so generally a very powerful card, and put it on top of the opponent's deck. So you're stopping them from drawing newer cards, as well as getting rid of a very powerful card on the field. Very good card. Like it quite a lot. Moving on to the next pack. So I'll try to go through the commons a bit faster, just because generally they don't have very good effects, or they have very underwhelming effects. A Ranger cannot be chosen by your opponent's abilities. Quite useful. Freya from Final Fantasy IX. So there's a couple of keywords here that I'll go over quickly. So Freya has haste, which means they can attack on or use their abilities on the first turn. Attack or use their tap abilities on the turn they come into play. In fact, that's exactly like haste in Magic. Good job. First strike also works the same way. So when attacking something, Freya will deal her damage first, as long as the other character doesn't have first strike, and then the other character will deal their damage back. So if Freya is attacking and is blocked by a 5,000 power creature, or forward, sorry, then Freya will deal her damage first and will not take any damage in response, as long as that creature, well, as long as that forward doesn't have first strike. And Freya has an overdrive ability, or a special ability. You have to do a very specific thing here. So you have to, for the cost, you have to discard a Freya card. Doesn't have to be the specific one. Can be any one from your hand. And you pay 2 lightning elemental crystals. And for that effect, for each Job Dragoon and card named Dragoon you control, you deal 2,000 damage to all forwards opponent controls. Now that's very useful, because in the previous set there were a lot of Dragoon cards printed, along with Kane, who is also a Dragoon, and Freya also counts as a Dragoon herself. So if you manage to get, I don't know, 5 Dragoon cards on the field, you can activate this ability and deal 10,000 damage to all your forwards opponent controls. And that's pretty good. Unfortunately, there's not been a lot of Freya cards printed, so it makes this effect slightly less relevant because it'd be harder to find duplicate Freyas in your deck to activate this ability. Still, quite a cool card. I like it a lot. So this is a sort of effect that happens, that you see quite a lot on different cards in different forms. But this one basically makes the cost to play the card named Kazusa, which we saw earlier, or Kurasame, and it reduces the cost to play them onto the field by 1. Can't become 0. So there might be other reducing effects that you have, and just one says that you can't reduce it below 1. Useful for a Type 0 combo deck. Geomancer, your standard backup, enters the field, deals 2,000 damage to all the forwards opponent controls. Again, quite useful for finishing off your opponents because you do get a second main phase in this game. So useful for finishing off your opponent's creatures. Here we got big ol' Quinna. So this is a mechanic that's appeared quite a bit in Opus 3, which is for each, not this one specifically, but this keywords, for each card in your hand, or for each card in your opponent's hand, do something. So in Quinna's instance, for each card in your hand, Quinna gains plus 1,000 power. Now considering you're drawing 2 cards per turn, and you start the game with 5 cards in your hand, Quinna could easily be a 5,000 power forward. Quinna also has a overdrive / special ability. I like to call them overdrive abilities, I'm not sure if that's the proper name for them. I played Final Fantasy X too much. And choose one forward opponent controls, which has been dealt damage this turn. If that forward has a special ability or an action ability, break it. So special ability it is special ability, not overdrive, but I'm going to keep calling it overdrive because I don't care. So this is a special ability, and activated abilities, or action abilities, are ones, if I can find one. So Guido obviously isn't a forward, but these are action abilities where you have to take an action, pay the cost, and take an action to use the ability. Useful little removal card, but you do have to play more Quinnas, and again there hasn't been many Quinnas printed, so not as useful. Next, so this is a Class 0 Cadet, so some of the cards we saw earlier will combo with this card. And Cease also has a special ability, Overdrive, where you choose one forward and until the end of the turn it loses 4,000 power. So power is power is this card number here, so Cease has 5,000 power. It's a representative of both your health and your attack power. So Cease can deal 5,000 damage and take 5,000 power worth of damage. So when a card loses 4,000 power, then Cease would only be able to deal 1,000 damage and take 1,000 damage. And if it was reduced any further to 0, then that would mean it goes straight to the graveyard. And again, so this one combos well with lots of Type 0 type cards, because it has the ability when Cease attacks, choose one forward opponent control, until the end of turn it loses 1,000 power for each Job Class 0 Cadet character you control. That's character, not just forward, so that includes backups as well. Very useful for a Type 0 combo deck. And remember, losing power is also very good because it reduces their attack power, and it could kill them if you have enough Type 0 forwards, or Type 0 characters. Overall, good for a combo deck. Gladiator, very simple Final Fantasy V style card. For each backup your opponent controls, gain 1000 power. So you can only have 5 backups, so if your opponent has 5 backups, this is 8000 power for 2 mana. That's alright, but in the early game it's only going to be a very weak card. Not very worth it. Got a holographic common dancer here. Choose one forward opponent controls. It loses all abilities until the end of turn. So it loses all its special abilities, it loses all its action abilities as well. Useful card, especially since it's reusable, since it doesn't have any CP cost, and you just tap it to use it, so it refreshes every round. Quite useful. So onto the rare cards for this pack. You've got 8. So when he enters the field, you choose 3 Job Class 0 cadets and activate them. So it's very useful to play in your second main to get forwards to make forwards activated for blocking next turn, or you can use it to activate the backups that you use to pay for it if you use 3 Job Class 0 cadet backups. Very useful card. Again, has a special ability. On overdrive, during this turn, 8 cannot be chosen by your opponent's summons or abilities, and the next damage dealt to him becomes 0. It's okay. World of Final Fantasy, Masked Woman. So when enters the field, you choose a dull forward of cost 4 or less, opponent controls, and break it. Very useful removal. Edward from Final Fantasy IV. So it has a reusable ability. Well, every turn of course, because you still have to tap him as a cost. Your opponent discards 1 card from his or her hand, and you can only use his ability during your turn. Fair enough. And he has a special ability, Escape. Edward cannot be chosen by your opponent's summons or abilities this turn. That can be activated after he's been targeted, because this game works with a stack. So the ability 1 would go on the stack. Then we could use Edward's. That would go on the stack. Then that would resolve first, making him untargetable, meaning the first card that targeted him is now unusable. Quite useful, but not really worth a special ability. From Type 0, we have a Sid. When he enters the field, you choose the forward opponent controls. If your opponent, and then again, so we see these new keywords here. If your opponent has no cards in his or her hand, do something. And here, you choose a forward your opponent controls, and if they have no cards, you break that forward. Very useful. Obviously how useful that will be depends quite a lot, because generally you won't have an empty hand, because you'll be holding cards that can be used to respond to other cards, or just cards that you haven't used in a turn. But it's actually very hard to fulfill that condition, unless you're able to make your opponent discard cards, with cards such as Edward. But it seems like an unnecessary amount of combo potential. So we've already covered Freya, so nothing new there. We have a Ice Crystal Cannoneer. When this one enters the field, you choose 2 forwards opponent controls, you dull them, and then freeze them. So what freeze means is they do not activate during your opponent's next activation step. So this is an extremely good little card for getting rid of 2 of your opponent's forwards for 2 turns. Meaning they can't attack and they cannot block. For 5 crystal, it's a bit awkward and a bit expensive, but still a very powerful effect for a common card. We've seen Dancer as well. So we've got we have got sync. So you choose, so again, activate his ability, pay a red, tap the card, choose one forward, if possible it must block this turn. Very useful since your opponent then has to block with any one of their cards, even if they didn't want to. Then you could also activate the home run swing ability, giving it plus 5,000 power and brave. So, for example, you could activate this ability first, making it 10,000 power and brave. You then attack, and then before your opponent declares blockers, you pay the cost and tap it, because your card is still attacking, and then you just say, your forward here, that needs to block this turn. And then it'll have to block the 10,000 power, which is very relevant. Nice little useful card. Seeing a lot of Final Fantasy Type 0 synergy in this set so far. Dancer, tap, deal 1000 damage to all forwards opponent controls. Again, useful if there's been quite a bit of damage. Berserker, cute little card. Cannot form parties. I haven't covered parties yet. So, for parties, if you have, say, 3 Earth Elemental, which is what this is, characters on your side of the board, instead of attacking individually, you could put them all together and make a single party and attack with that. Upside is, it gives it far more power, so if your opponent wants to block, they're going to lose a big card. Or it encourages your opponent to, if they're on their last bit of life, to have to block with a card valuable to them. On the downside, a party only deals 1 attack, 1 damage to your opponent. So say you had 3 people in a party, you wouldn't deal 3 damage, you'd only deal 1 to your opponent. But sometimes that's very useful for getting rid of a particularly bothersome card that the opponent has. So this one's a bit of a double-edged sword. It's quite cheap for its power, so 3 crystal points for 8,000 power is pretty good. But downside is it has to attack every turn and it cannot form parties. So could be useful if you had the right synergies. For example, there are some that will buff up standard unit cards, which is what this is. So to make it even more powerful. But other than that, there isn't really much to do with it. Mystic Knight, when he's put from the field into the break zone, choose a forward opponent controls and deal at 4,000 damage. So it's useful for dealing, I don't know, a card with 8,000 power, because you block with this card, deal it 4,000 damage, and then when it goes from the field to the graveyard, it'll deal it another 4,000 damage. Not the best option, but useful if you don't have many cards for combo purposes. So we've got a holographic from that pack, DGS Trooper, First Class, from Final Fantasy VII. Probably from the extended games. Ice Job standard forwards you control, gain plus 2,000 power. That's a pretty good ability, but it's something you'd have to build around. And again, you can only have one of these out in play at a time, so an interesting card, especially only for 4 crystal and 8,000 power. That's pretty good. Next up, Yang is a rare card. So he gains power and brave if you control another card named Ursula. I haven't seen that one yet, but that means it just has to be a forward or a backup. When he enters the field, you can play an Ursula card from your hand onto the field, so very useful. And he has a special ability, deal damage equal to half of Yang's power to all the forward's opponent controls. Pretty good. So, and you round it up to the nearest 1,000, so with the plus 1,000 boost, that would be 5,000 to all his forwards. Without it would be 4,000. Still a very good ability for finishing off any of the opponent's creatures forwards. Shiva, pretty simple. Choose up to 2 forwards your opponent controls, dull them. Very useful for getting in those final points of damage against massive blockers. Cagnasso. If Cagnasso receives damage during your opponent's turn, reduce the damage by 4,000 instead. When Cagnasso enters the field, all the forwards opponent controls loses 1,000 power for every 2 water creatures you control. Now bear in mind that doesn't say until end of turn, so it's a permanent effect. So it's a permanent board-wide effect. So that's characters as well, so that includes backup. So if you have a fully mono water deck, you can bring this card in, and all the forwards your opponent controls will lose 1,000 power for every 2 water characters you control. Very useful ability. Finally, another Final Fantasy VII card. From Dirge of Cerebus, I'm sure. Genesis Avatar is also card named Genesis in all situations, so I'm sure there's going to be some combo potential there for something else. When Genesis Avatar enters the field, deal damage equal to half the power of all the half its power to all the forwards opponent controls. So that would be 5,000 damage when it enters the field. Quite a useful board clearing effect, and for 9,000 power, that's pretty powerful. I can't really see any decks it would fit into at the moment, but we do have quite a few more cards to be going through. Another mannequin card. When the Horror of Antiquity is put from the field onto the break zone, you may play 1 Horror of Antiquity from your hand onto the field. So just keep playing them over and over. You can only have 3 of this in your deck, so it's not too horrifying. Got another semblance of a gunslinger here, so keep moving on. More delightful PC Final Fantasy V art. Blue Mage, choose 1 forward of cost 5 or higher, return it to its owner's hand. Again, backup breaking effects are useful, just because you can get... If you have that 5 backup limit and you need more cards, you can just break them. Pretty useful. And to get rid of one of your opponent's 5 cost forwards can be very helpful. So this Cannoneer can destroy 2 backups and deal 7,000 damage to your opponent. So destroy this Cannoneer and one other other backup, and you can deal 1 forward 7,000 damage. It's a lot of damage, but a pretty high cost. Mog, Final Fantasy IX. When he enters the field, you control card named Ico, draw 1 card. And then you can pay 3 to put him into the break zone, choose a forward and return it to its owner's hand. Again, very useful for getting in those final points of damage. Summoner. Put Summoner into break zone, cast 1 Summoner, summon of cost 6 or less from your hand without paying the cost. Very useful for sneaking out high cost summons, and very useful for getting rid of the backup limit. Getting around the backup limit. Finally, we've got Izana. When they enter the field, you may search for a Chocobo or a Job Chocobo or card name Chocobo and add it to your hand. Now, these were printed in previous sets, and they got extra power when partying up with other characters. So, can be useful if you're making a very party-based Chocobo-oriented combo deck. I haven't seen one, but it sounds like a fun idea. Got a holo card for this one. So Harley. The cost required to play card name Edward onto the field was reduced by 2. That's a very impressive little ability. How much was the Edward that we had? So our Edward that we have here costs 3. So it costs 1 mana to put that onto the field. That's not too bad. Fantasy 4 Zangetsu. So you can pay 1 mana, tap it and choose a forward, deal it 7,000 damage, and you can only use this ability if you control a card named Edge. I believe there's some edges printed in previous sets, so that could be a very useful ability, especially for only 1 mana. Otherwise you can pay 1 lightning mana and choose a forward and deal it 4,000 damage. Again, still pretty good. Amarant from Final Fantasy 9. You can break him and put 1 forward into the break zone, including itself. Then you choose a power and you deal it damage equal to the power of the forward put into the break zone. So you could tap this card and choose itself and deal 9,000 damage to a forward, well, one of your forwards or one of your opponent's forwards. Useful. Windrake. Choose a forward you control other than Windrake. Return it and Windrake to their owner's hands. Useful for card effects that happen when you play them from your hand, and just very cute. Give it a 7 out of 10 for cuteness. Gilgamesh. So I've made several decks in the past that have heavily relied upon Gilgamesh and his various synergies. This one seems a lot more basic, although slightly complicated by the different elements on the side here. So you've got a fire ability, a wind ability, an earth ability, and a lightning ability. So if you and they can be activated many times. So if you had 5 fire CP available, you'd be able to activate this ability 5 times and deal something up to 10,000 damage. And again for the rest of these. So if you have lots of earth CP available, you can use that and pump up this Gilgamesh for 1,000 at a time. Useful, but I think if I used it in one of my decks, I would use it as fodder for the special abilities of other Gilgameshes, since they have really quite nice abilities. On to the next pack. Deuce. Choose an attacking forward, deal it 2,000 damage, or special ability, choose 1 forward and deal it 4,000 damage for every job class 0 cadet forward you control. Again, very useful for a Type 0 combo theme deck, and it's generally useful for getting rid of that last bit of damage on a card. Also useful for first strike cards, because you can activate this ability before damage, and then the first strike card can deal the rest of the damage. I have no idea how to pronounce this, so I'm going to say Seguarides. If you control Brandalus, you gain first strike for this card during your turn, and you can... Oh, sorry, the card named Brandalus you control gains first strike during your turn, and you can tap it and choose a forward, and that loses first strike. Useful for a surprise factor, but it is on the field, so your opponent can take a wild guess at what you're going to be doing. That's very cute. Black Chocobo forms a party. That party cannot be blocked. That is a very useful ability for getting in consistent damage every turn. And all it requires is another wind card on the field. Very neat. I like the art on this card for Black Waltz 3. Forward, 7,000 power, 4 crystal points, lightning. When he enters the field, choose a forward your opponent controls. Until the end of turn, it loses 1,000 power for each card in your hand. Very useful. It'd be a tough fit to fit into a lightning deck, but I can see it being useful. Then we have a couple more cards that we've already seen. Leonora. When Leonora enters the field, you may search for 1 card named Polom or Porom. So in the previous set, Palom and Porom were printed, and together they have a special ability that just, you can deal a damage to your opponent, to get one step towards winning or deal that final burst. Being able to tutor out that card and put it into your hand from your deck is a very cool ability. We could be seeing a couple more combo decks involving those two in the future. So we've got another Cloud card. So if you control another Category 7 forward, he gains Brave. And if you tap him, you can choose one attacking forward and it gains 2,000 power until the end of turn. That can be used on this Cloud. So again, if you have another Final Fantasy 7 forward, you can attack with Cloud. He has Brave. Then your opponent can block, and then you can, in response, you can activate his ability and pump him up to 9,000 damage. Useful for a bit of a sneaky sneak, but again, he's on the field, so your opponent can possibly predict what you're going to be doing. Still, for free crystal, that's quite a neat little card. Quacho Queen? It's alright. Choose a forward, gains 1,000 power for each forward you control until the end of turn. Rewards playing lots and lots of perhaps little forwards. Useful for getting one card beefed up quite a lot. Can be used as a bit of a surprise attack, again, can use it when your opponent least expects it. Angeal Penance. Interesting. Angeal Penance is also card name Angeal in all situations. He has haste. When he deals damage to your opponent, you choose one damage forward and break it. Bear in mind that can be one of you. It doesn't say one of your opponent's damaged forwards. So if one of your cards is damaged and none of your opponents are, you have to pick one of your cards. Otherwise, really interesting. I like the art on it. Very nice. More Type 0 synergy. For each job class 0 cadet other than King, King gains plus 1,000 power. He's already 9,000 power. That's pretty good. And you can use a special ability to then deal that damage to a forward. Pretty solid card. You can see that being used in a lot of Type 0 oriented decks. When it enters the field, you may play one job ninja or card name ninja of 3 or less from your hand onto the field. It's pretty good. And then special ability, choose up to 2 forwards. They cannot attack or block this turn. Very useful for getting in that final point of damage. And last in this pack, King Tycoon. When King Tycoon enters the field, you may search for one card named Faris or Lena and add it to your hand. Haven't seen any of those yet, but interesting little combination, and also an EX burst. I can only assume those cards to be quite powerful, mainly because that was a heroic rarity card. So we saw some combos with this earlier, but this is the WRO Commander. Again, sort of Dirge Cerebrus card. So if you control WRO member, he gains 2,000 power, and if you control a Vincent, he also gains. This card also gains 1,000 power, so it could potentially be 10,000 power for comboing with 2 other card effects. Pretty good for a Vincent WRO combo deck. Red Mage enters the field, choose a forward opponent controls. If you control 4 or more red mages, deal at 8,000 damage. Had to pause there to double read that because that seems like a pretty powerful effect, but with a pretty big cost, having to play 4 or more red mages. Ultimately, probably not worth it, but a nice little card. Deep Ground Soldier, standard unit, pretty good. That combos with a lot of different things. When he enters the field, you may search for a DGS Trooper first class and add it to your hand. It's pretty good. Dancer, you've seen Dancer already. Seen that one, seen that one. So when we get to the commons, we just kind of have to go through them a bit because we've already seen a lot of them. We haven't seen this one. Kator Bashtar. When he attacks, choose one forward of cost 3 or less, your opponent controls, and freeze it. Now remember, freezing doesn't dull a card, so if we use it on an active card, they can still do all their normal stuff next turn. We've seen 8, we've seen Master Woman. So here we have Ico, that combos with the Moogle we saw earlier. And Ico is just a chooser card, so you may search for a category 9 forward and add it to your hand. Useful for a category 9 Fiend deck. Here we have another Type 0 card. Combos again with Class 0 Cadet, but 7,000 power for 1 mana, that's pretty good. But downsides, cannot block. When Jack attacks, Jack does not activate during your next active phase, so basically freezes himself. But if you cast his special ability, Activate Jack, or Reflex, you activate him, and he loses all his abilities until the end of turn. So then he can block, and when he attacks he does activate at the beginning of your next step. An interesting card, and very useful for putting on early pressure. But ultimately I think it's a bit outclassed by a lot of other cards. So next up we have good old Vivi. When he enters the field, you choose a forward opponent controls and deal it 5,000 damage. Kind of like the red mage we saw earlier, which deals 8,000 damage, but no stipulations. And it's an EX burst, so it's useful for when your opponent's just finished attacking, and maybe something of theirs is damaged, so you can deal it 5,000 damage and finish it off, or you can deal another one of their cards 5,000 damage and stop them from, or discourage them from attacking with it. More mannequin cards. When he attacks, choose a backup you control and activate it. That's actually not too bad for 3 mana and 7,000 power. I'd say that's okay. Useful for very backup combo heavy decks, which are actually quite useful in Wind Element. Ninjas. Choose a dull forward, cost 2 or less, opponent controls and break it. Solid. Useful for removal if very aggressive decks become the norm. Luca, card name Polom, you control gains 1,000 power, and you can activate Luca's special ability. So you've got to do quite a lot of things. You've got to sacrifice a Luca, you've got to pay 5, you've got to dull this card, and you've got to dull Rydia. But you choose one forward and deal it 10,000 damage. That's pretty much enough to kill anything. Artemision from Final Fantasy IX. Still one of the best Final Fantasies. When he enters the field, place any number of cards from your hand to the bottom of your deck, and then draw the same number of cards. That's an extremely useful ability. You get rid of, so for example in the late game, you could get rid of all your low cost cards and pull out some really high cost ones that can win you the game. I like that one. Queen. If you control another class 0 cadet, so lots of type 0 synergies, Queen has first strike. Special ability, Queen gains haste and cannot be blocked until the end of turn. Very useful. Extremely useful for getting in that final blow if your opponent isn't expecting it. If you have 2 queens in your hand, you play this queen, then you activate the special ability, giving her haste and cannot be blocked for that final bit of damage. So in addition to the Angeal card we saw earlier, we have regular Angeal. When Angeal is put from the field into the break zone, you may search for one card named Zac and add it to your hand. I haven't seen any Zacs so far, but sounds like a good idea. Tutoring for specific cards, especially if it's a combo deck. Then we've got a couple of rares that we've already seen. So here we have Angeal and Angeal. So if Angeal is on the field, because this is acting as a card named Angeal, in all situations you cannot have a second one. Very important to remember. But you can have, because they're separate cards, you can have 3 of this card and 3 of this card in your deck. And if you had an Angeal with a special ability, you could sacrifice this Angeal or this Angeal to activate it, because this one has a card name Angeal. Very neat. Moving on past the other cards that we've already seen. Soldier, eh? Final Fantasy VII. Again, another Dirge of Cerebrus card. When Genesis enters the field, choose a forward opponent controls, dull it and freeze it. And when he deals damage to your opponent discards a card from his or her hand. Very useful. Especially if your opponent has very few cards in their hand, but also very powerful cards in their hand. So coming around to a couple more common cards we've seen before, we've got Vivi, Blue Mage, and Ursula that was mentioned earlier. So if you control a Yang, Ursula gains plus 3,000 power. That's pretty good. A couple of combo cards. So here's the Yang that combos with Ursula. So they kind of go off each other, so if both of these are in play, they both have 9,000 power. And if you play this Yang first, you can play this Ursula for free. And Ursula has a special ability where you choose a forward and deal it 9,000 damage. You can only use this ability if you have Yang on the field, but kind of playing them both together. So that's a nice little combo there. If there are other monk cards or cards that buff up monks, you could make a very viable monk combo deck. I like it. I like the potential. I have to look into that. Make a note. Mystic Knight, Final Fantasy V. If Mystic Knight receives damage from summons or abilities, reduce the damage by 5,000. So you need to deal 10,000 damage to that card to kill it. That's okay. Good basic card. Again, cast a summon for cost 6 or less. Well, I just got very lucky there. So I will go through the holographic in a minute. Tsukinowa. One crystal, ninja, cannot be blocked by a forward of cost 3 or more. Very useful cards because it can get past a lot of high cost cards. We've seen a couple of cards like these in previous sets already. For example, Zidane from Opus 1. He was a legendary, 3,000 power, 2 cost, and could not be blocked and could not be targeted by any abilities or summons. which is very cool. This seems like a slightly weaker version of that, but for only 1 mana, and has haste if you control an edge. The Girl Who Forgot Her Name from World of Final Fantasy. So we've seen a couple of World of Final Fantasy cards in the first couple of sets, so they're just bringing them out sporadically. And when the Girl Who Forgot Her Name enters the field, you may search for a World of Final Fantasy forward and add it to your hand. So Len and his sister, whose name I can't remember.
Raina?
Ren. Ren and Len. So you can get some of those. And they combo together, so that's useful. And they were Fire and Earth as well, so an Earth Fire World of Final Fantasy. An Earth Fire World of Final Fantasy deck could be useful. Both from the same pack.
Jesus.
So we've got another Porom card. So again, as I said before, Palom and Porom were brought in the last set, but now we're getting a few more that can also activate their special abilities, which is awesome. When it enters the field, activate all the forwards you control. And a special ability, choose a forward you control. During this turn, the damage dealt to it, the next damage to it becomes 0. And I'm saving the holographic and the other card until last, because they are the first legendaries we've pulled, and they are both in fact the same card. So highest rarity, but usually the most powerful card. So let's see what this one. Deleter. There's been a couple of deleters already released in previous Opus 1 and Opus 2. But for this one, when Deleter is chosen by an ability of a character your opponent controls, you break that character. When Deleter is chosen by a summon of your opponent, deal 1 point of damage to your opponent. That's pretty good. That's pretty good.
Understatement.
I look forward to making a deck around that. Also, his job is Knight, which actually has some combo potential. I like it already. So we've got another Freya, some Cannoneers, Sync, Black Chocobos. Commons we've already gone through before. So let's just jump right into the rare cards. So here we've got Pamphret the Darkening Cloud. Both players select one forward they control and put it into the break zone. Very useful for if your opponent has one very powerful forward. So useful towards the end game. I like it. And you can also play a very cheap forward before you play it to give it something to sacrifice. Rares we've seen before. This is a nice little legendary as well. Garnet. Garnet cannot be chosen by your opponent's summons. Very cool. When you cast a summon, all forwards you control gain 1,000 power until the end of the turn. Very cool. Special ability, cast one summon of cost 3 or less from your hand without paying its cost. Very cool. Could save a lot of mana there. Also, it's a repeatable ability. I like it a lot. I really should be organising these as I'm going along, but nah. Common Black Mage. Enters the field, choose a forward your opponent controls, and if you control 4 more Black Mages, it loses 8,000 power. Quite easy to kill something with that. It's alright. Ephemeral Summoner. Basically more mannequins. They have abilities similar to their actual counterparts, but in most cases are quite weaker. So this Yuna, or the Ephemeral Summoner, enters the field. You may search for a water summoner cost 4 or less, put it on the top of your deck. So I think regular Yuna has a better effect than that. And imaginary brawler attacks, choose a forward of the highest cost opponent controls that cannot block this turn. I think regular Tifa has a better ability than that. I think you're able to choose the one that cannot block. Though I'll have to double check. Just put that out there, just a couple of queens, that's a hollow as well. So it's quite nice. And Final Fantasy VII. Shulk. Again, probably Dirge of Cerebrus. Haven't played that much. And if I did, it was a very long time ago. Anyway, when your opponent is dealt damage, activate Shulk, and you can pay 4 mana, choose a forward, and dull it. That actually has quite a lot of combo potential, if you have the mana for it. So you attack, deal damage, activate Shulk, you can then use their ability, or use the ability to mean something can't block, maybe something a bit weaker than your opponent has. Then you can attack with your big creature, and then activate Shulk, and then Shulk can be used for more mana, or for activating this ability again to get more damage through. Useful little card. Probably useful when you have quite a big, heavy deck. Inuo. Final Fantasy V. I can't remember Final Fantasy V so well, so this may very well be one of the bosses then, in it. When a character is put from the field into the break zone, you may remove it from the game instead. Choose one card in the break zone, remove it from the game. So that's useful for if your opponent has running a deck that requires a lot of going through their graveyard to find specific creatures. Gecko. When it enters the field, you may play a Job Ninja, or card named Ninja of 4 or less from your hand onto the field. Ninjas love ninjas. All Job Ninja cards, so you pay 2 mana, 1 fire, 1 any colour. All Job Ninja and card name ninjas you control gain 1,000 power to the end of the turn, including Gecko. It's okay. It's very good if you're making a ninja combo deck. Not that you'd ever want one of those. I'm a terrible person. Krill. That's an interesting little card. So it's a heroic rarity. 2 mana, 6,000 power. Deals 6,000, and then it has 2 separate special abilities. Deals 6,000 power to all forwards your opponent controls, or choose 2 damage forwards and break them. Wow, that's pretty good. But can only be used with very specific deck archetypes. So only if you're comboing with fire, or only if you're comboing with lightning, or you have some way to make those crystals. Whew. Onwards and forwards. So we have more black mages that combo with themselves. Ah, I see. So there are 2 lightning black mages in this set. One that chooses an active forward of cost 3 or less, and you can break it. And one that combos with the number of black mages that you have in play. Very cool. Other than that, it's a couple of cards that we've already seen, and quite a few that we haven't, so sure, let's go. Pelennor, World of Final Fantasy. Card name Brandalis, you control gains Brave. Deal 1,000 damage to all forwards. That's all forwards, including yours. So you've got to be careful about that, but still useful for finishing off weakened cards. If you control, so this is a Dirge of Cerebrus Yuffie. So if you control Vincent, the cost of playing Yuffie onto the field becomes 0. 3 ninjas, always nice. And if you control Vincent, this Yuffie has plus 1,000 power and Brave. So you could build up a Vincent ninja deck for combo potential. Seems a bit clunky to me. Maybe I just don't like Yuffie. Cater, backup, solid abilities. Choose a forward, deal 1,000 damage. Choose a damage forward, deal 2,000 damage. Just useful for picking off your opponent's different creatures. Note that the top ability is a wind crystal, and this second ability is a lightning crystal. So you need multiple different crystal types in your deck to be able to play this effectively. Thief, hollow, standard unit, put it into break zone. Your opponent mills 2 cards. It's okay if you're building a mill deck. It's not really a mill archetype yet. In Opus 1 there are a couple of cards that you could use to mill your opponent's cards, but nothing good so far. Unless you build an entire deck specifically with those types of cards. Going through the rares, already got quite a few doubles. Machina. When the forward damage by Machina is put from the field into the break zone on the same turn, choose the one forward opponent controls and do it 4,000 damage. So you could attack with this card and then deal it a bit more damage, and then you can activate the secondary effect. That's pretty good. And then a special ability, Guardian Blades. Choose a forward opponent controls, deal 8,000 damage, and deal 4,000 damage to all the other forward opponent controls. It's okay. Very expensive though, and again, with all of these Type 0 cards, there's not a lot of support for them, because there's only been these print of these cards. So if I was to build a deck with Machina, I only have 3 of them. So I have to play this one already, and then the chance of getting the other 2 out of my deck, considering we have 50 card decks, after about turn 5, is 2 in 40, or 1 in 20. 1 in 20 to be able to play a cool ability is not great in my books. Obviously, if you built a deck specifically with Class 0 cadets, there's a lot of synergies there, but you can't count on their special abilities being relevant at any point during the match. Unless you get a lot of draw going on, and you go through most of your entire deck. But then you're sacrificing some of your Class 0 cadet synergies, and that then goes against what you're trying to do. So going through the cards I've just opened the next pack, pretty standard. Got a nice little Dragoon card. I have myself built a Dragoon synergy deck that I wish to improve upon, but I don't think I'll be adding this one into it anytime soon. Cute little white mage. If white mage or a forward forming a party with white mage receives damage, the damage decreases by 3,000. That's pretty good. Useful for protecting big cards if you make a party with them. Going through the rest of the cards. Shiny Ico, it's just shiny in the background. It's alright. Rare cards we've already seen. Shell, Kinuo, Kagnazo. And the heroic rarity, Trey. Another Class 0 cadet. I wonder what the main theme of this Opus 3 is. If it wasn't obvious already. If he's active, he cannot be chosen by your opponent's abilities, and if he's dull, he cannot be chosen by your opponent's summons. It's solid. It's nothing too special or great. It's a bit wonky to use, but like I said, solid. Solid. You done yet?
Oh.
Very good. Again, just a lot of cards that we've already seen. Wow. I think we've seen all of those apart from the heroic rarity one. So I'll just put that out while I make open the next pack. Zezat. Is that how you pronounce that? XZZAT?
No idea, it's not Fantasy 5.
Exactly. Yeah, we'll say Zezat. He has first strike, 8,000 power. That's pretty good. And if you control a Galuf, Kelga, or Dorgan, he gains 1,000 power and Brave. Wow, that's pretty good. Bear in mind he only gets that power increase once, so if you have all 3 of those, he still only gets 1,000 power and Brave. New common card, Time Mage. Put him into the break zone, pay the mana cost and ability cost here. Choose and then again choose a forward you control, remove it from the game. Then play the removed forward onto the field dull. That's interesting. So what you can do with that is potentially save one of your forwards from being destroyed. So say you attack into your opponent and they pull out a lot of summons to buff up their creature or buff up their forward and kill your forward, then you can use this card to bring your forward out of play and then back into play, removing any damage they would have received. Quite useful. A bit tricky, or tricksy to use, but it is what it is. Put Bard into the break zone. All forwards you control gain plus 2,000 power. Good for getting in that final hit. Or for just a good hit at your opponent and freeing up a backup slot. So we've got a heroic summon, and that is a weird little card. Zalara the Death Seraph. Break all dull forwards of cost 2, 3, 5, 7, 11 and 13. Those are prime numbers, right?
Is that the prime numbers? Yes.
That sounds like prime numbers to me. Cute. I'll give it a cute out of 10.
That might have been his ability in the game. Because, you know, there's always death level 3 and 5 and stuff. Maybe there's death or prime in that game.
I'll give it a relevant to the game series then. There you go. Final Fantasy Type 0, Diablos. I like the artwork on that, it's pretty nice. Choose a forward. Deal 1,000 damage for each character you control. If you control a class 0 cadet forward, which, to be honest, you're going to if you're playing this in a deck, select 3 backups you control and activate them. So it pays for itself. That's pretty good. Did someone say Type 0 cards? Because we still got them. Yay. Black Tortoise Lassie Gilgamesh. What? I've really not played that card a lot. It has Brave, so you can attack and then activate its abilities. So you can choose a forward, it loses first strike, so if it's attacking into a first strike creature, it's cute. Or you can make it gain 2,000 power. Again, it's a bit cute. And then if it's not blocked, or it's blocked by something weaker than it, it can then use its abilities on your turn. So if they attack in with a 9,000 creature, you can block, tap this, activate its ability, give it 10,000 and kill the 9,000. Your opponent will see it coming, but it's cute. Another Final Fantasy XII summon, very relevant since that game's just come out. Still haven't played it, but well, I played the original at least a little bit. Anyway, Chaos, Walker of the Wheel, choose a forward opponent controls, break it. If that forward is put into the break zone, your opponent may play 1 forward from their hand onto the field. So it's very useful for getting rid of a very big creature, but you got to be wary that their opponent might just play another one. I mean, it also denies your opponent from attacking with that new card for the turn, so it's still very useful, still very relevant, and for 3 mana, very cost efficient. The only problem is the downside. But that can be mitigated if your opponent doesn't have anything in their hands. You can make them discard their hand. If you can do cute things like that, then that's a very cool little card. Going through most of that one, we've seen most of those all those commons and rares. So Faris combos with card name Sildra and card name Lena. So when it enters the field, you can find the Sildra, and if you control a Lena, Faris gains 1,000 power. And they're a pirate. Neat. I'm not sure if we've seen this one already, but Knight, for each backup you control, Knight gains 1,000 power. So we did see one earlier, which was the opposite of that. For each backup your opponent controls, gain 1,000 power. This one's more in your control, but still pretty standard. Standard unit card.
No, go on.
I'm good. Oh, fine.
Well, lose some weight.
Fair play. It's okay. I believe this is Gilgamesh. Yeah, it's Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh Mannequin. Choose a forward. Play 1. Pay 1. Choose a forward. Deal 1,000 damage. Pay 2. Tap it. Choose a forward. Deal 3,000 damage. It's okay. Solid for dealing with cards. Good if you're building a mannequin-only deck. Why you're building a mannequin-only deck, it's beyond me, but... Not sure if we've seen this one already, but... More ninjas is Ayoi? Is Ayoi. Yeah. Enter the field, you may play a job. Ninja, or card name Ninja, costs 3 or less from your hand. Ninjas, man, they love ninjas. That's another potential archetype I've made. And the last card in this one. Some rate him as the best Final Fantasy villain. I'm not sure about that, but lots of people vehemently agree. Kefka. If you control 3 or more different elemental backups, Kefka gains 3,000 power. And if you control 5 or more different element backups, Kefka gains Brave. To be honest, it's not that great. Even when he's at full power, he's 8,000 power Brave. But only 2 mana, or 2 crystal points, but nah, I'm not feeling it. The mage job doesn't really combo with anything either. Just looking through the commons here, although, hey, the Hollow Kefka seems a bit nice. Sweet! More lightning. The City of Final Fantasy art as well.
Isn't it the same one from the first set?
Nope.
You sure?
Yeah, that was the 13 art. That looked like the same pose.
Oh really? Oh, okay.
When lightning enters the field, choose a card named Odin in your backup or in your break zone. You may put it on top of your deck. That's pretty cool. Gestalt Drive, discard a card named Odin, choose up to 2 forwards of cost 4 or less and break them. Very useful. 4 is a very good crystal cost to be able to destroy quite nicely. And being able to bring the Odin to your hand and then use it for that ability, it's just icing on the cake. So going through some of the cards we have already, we've already seen. So that's a new one. Usually the newer ones now will be the heroic or legendary ones. Zero Must the Condemner. Choose up to 1 forward from your break zone of cost equal to or less than the damage you have been dealt. Return it to your hand. Your opponent selects one forward of costs equal to or less than the damage you have been dealt and puts it into the break zone. Wow. That's a pretty cool card, especially if you draw it off the top after taking damage. Say you take 9,000 damage from a card, pull this off the top of your deck into the damage zone, then you can choose a card of 9,000 power and put it into your hand, and your opponent has to destroy one of their cards, which has 9,000 power. I like it. I like it a lot. Could be very useful, especially in a slower deck. So again, we're just going through some of the cards that we've already seen. Haven't seen that one yet. And yep, and the others we have seen. So that is a legendary card as well, which is pretty good. Holo legendaries, very nice. If you control a category 7 forward, the cost for playing Aerith onto the field is reduced by 1. So 2 crystal points for playing a card is a pretty good amount. And the forwards you control cannot be chosen by your opponent's backup abilities. That's a pretty powerful ability. I like it. So again, just got quite a few ones that we've already seen. Lots of standard unit cards. Have we seen 7? I'm going to say we haven't seen 7. Or Rydia. Yeah, cool. What does LOV stand for?
That's just what I was looking at.
It's the...
Is it like the sequel to 4?
I was going to say... I thought that was the After Years.
There is another one.
Is that?
Yeah, there's 2.
Oh.
I think. I thought that's what it is though. LOV.
My Final Fantasy knowledge has failed me.
They're both of us. That's saying something.
Cannot remember what LOV stands for, but 3 mana backup. When Rydia enters the field, you may search for 1 summon and add it to your hand. That's pretty good. Would you be able to find me a drink out of the fridge, please?
No.
And 7.
You know what it is, right? LOV. Lord of Vermilion.
Lord of Vermilion?
Yeah. It's not even a Final Fantasy game. It's the card game you play in the arcades in Japan.
Oh! Well, that's silly, because now we've got a Final Fantasy card game with the Lord of Vermilion card game.
If that's what it is, which it looks like it is.
That's just very silly. And 7, which is more Zero Cadet. Synergies. It's not like I'm getting sick and tired of these synergies with the Zero Cadets, but lots of different ones. Choose a special ability or auto ability and cancel the effect is kinda cool though, but it costs a special ability to use it, so not great, but here we go. Through the next pack, Time Mage, Bard, Geomancer, Emina, Gladiator, thank you, Summoner, Zana, 2 Enuras in a row, and, oh, I believe I saw this one mentioned before. Wow, that is a very powerful effect. Tap it, remove Dorgan from the game, and you choose a forward and remove that one from the game. Very powerful little effect there. Also, he just looks like a really fed up old man. I like him. Again, just going through Freya, Black Chocobo, Cannoneer. Ooh. White Tiger Lassie Kunmi. I don't know either. Has first strike. When one or more forwards you control are chosen by your opponent's summon, the effect is cancelled if your opponent doesn't pay 3. Very useful effect. And then we have 9. And correct me if I'm wrong, but all the Class 0 or the Final Fantasy Type 0 characters are named after a deck of cards?
All but 2 of them.
All but 2 of them.
I believe.
And then obviously some of the other ones, like the teachers and stuff, that we've assumedly gone through in all these. When 9 attacks, choose a forward you control. Until the end of the turn, it gains 1,000 power for each Class 0 cadet forward you control. That's actually a pretty good one. And his special ability is all forwards cannot block this turn. Wow, that is exceptionally useful for the finishing blow. I think that actually makes Class 0 cadet decks slightly more viable. Got Black Waltz number 2. I do like the Black Waltzes as enemies in Final Fantasy IX. They offered quite a bit of a challenge whenever they showed up, most of the time. And then when this one enters the field, choose the forward opponent controls and deal it 3,000 damage, and 1,000 more damage for each card in your opponent's hand. So if they have 7 cards in their hand, guess who gets 10,000 damage? One of your opponent's cards, obviously. So this is a very interesting card. So I didn't really explain light and dark, but light and dark are separate from the other elements we've seen before. So this is a dark summon. So you use any mana to pay this, and if you control a dark forward, the cost of this is 3 less, so it costs 4. Oh, that is a powerful yet horribly damaging effect. Break all the forwards your opponent controls. You receive damage equal to the number of forwards broken by this effect. That could be potentially very useful if you have any effect that can prevent damage in a turn. Which I'm not sure there is, but still. Also a legendary card. Very powerful effect. Still high risk, high reward. Could turn the game around if you're facing down the barrel of a massive pain in the ass, or for getting in that final blow. As I keep saying, some cards are just useful for getting in that final hit. Again, we see Aerith, legendary Earth card, Wind card, and we've got a Steiner. Yay, Steiner! When he enters the field, you may search for a Category 9 character and add it to your hand. And if you control a Category 9 character, other than Steiner, he gains 1,000 power. So you can tutor you a card, and he gets more powerful from other cards. But remember, only once. He doesn't gain 1,000 power for each Category 9 character other than Steiner, only if there is another. Subtle differences, but that can change your deck building strategies quite a lot. So just going through again. Oh, I don't think we've seen Ace yet. Ico. Wow. That's some nice Ico art. So Ace so he powers up all the other Zero Cadet forwards. And you can cut cards, okay? Reveal the top 4 cards of your deck. For each job class Zero Cadet revealed this way, deal it 4,000 damage. So you could potentially deal something 16,000 damage if you're building a class Zero Cadet deck, which it's obviously geared towards. And then we have Ico. 2 mana tap. Put Ico into the break zone, choose 4 summons in your break zone, add 1 of them to your hand, and remove the rest from the game. Again, very useful for being able to remove a backup from your backup line. Adding a summon back to your hand is extremely useful. A shame that you lose the rest of them, but very useful card. Similar effect to this card, Summoner. When he enters the field, choose a summon in your break zone and add it to your hand. But bear in mind this one costs 4 mana. And you can't remove this one once it's in play. So you can't remove it for another effect. And I'm just going through common cards we've seen before. X-Death, I'll go through that one in a second. Okay, we've got quite a few ones to go. No, we've got actually quite a few ones to go through here. So we got Rem, Class 0 Cadet. When Rem enters the field, choose a category type 0 card from your break zone, add it to your hand. Pretty good for recycling cards that you've used before. Summon, Atomos from the City of Final Fantasy art, but it's also a Final Fantasy 9 summon. Choose a forward, deal it damage equal to the highest power forward you control. Very useful removal card. Kurosame, Instructor. Interesting, not a type 0 cadet or what have you. When he enters the field, choose up to 2 forwards opponent controls and freeze them. Again, that's not dulling them and freezing them, so they could still do stuff on their turn. Final Fantasy 4 card, Theodore. When one of your water characters other than Theodore enters the field, choose a forward you control. Select one from the following. It gains 8,000 power to end of turn. It gains first strike or it gains brave. Wow, that's a really cool effect. And if you're building a mono water deck, that could be an extremely powerful card. Wow, give that a 7 out of 10. I just had a look at this. This is a legendary lightning card. 5 mana. When X-Death attacks, all characters opponent controls loses their jobs until the end of the turn. So any synergies, for example Dragoon synergies, Ninja synergies, they all lose their jobs until the end of the turn. Wow, that's powerful. But then this ability is even crazier. Grand Cross. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lightning mana, or 7 lightning crystal points. Remove all characters on the field other than X-Death and all cards in the break zone from the game. You want a board clear? You got a board clear. Unfortunately, it literally clears everything. All backups, all forwards. Madness. I like it. It's a card you'd only play when you're extremely desperate. Going through these pretty quickly. Knights, semblance, blah blah blah. Seen these already. Oh! So, what we did get with this expansion is a 2 starter decks. A Final Fantasy Type 0, Class 0 Cadet Synergy starter deck, and a Final Fantasy 9 starter Synergy deck. So what you can get are holographics of the starter cards that are exclusive to those sets. This is a Queen from the starter deck, and when the Queen enters the field, choose one forward opponent controls. If you control 2 or more Zero Class Cadets, you can dull it, and if you control 5 or more Zero Class Cadets, you break it. That's pretty good. So that's the last card from that pack. So it's a 3 mana, Brave 8000, and its drawback is you can only pay with Ice backup CP to play White Tiger with Sea Nimbus from your hand onto the field. So I haven't really explained this much, but in Final Fantasy TCG there are 2 ways to pay costs. You have backups that can tap for one of their elements, so a Frost backup or Ice backup will tap for Ice. Or you can discard a card from your hand to generate 2 of that particular element. So discarding this card from your hand would generate 2 Ice crystal points. So what this card is saying is you have to have 3 Ice backups or cards able to generate Ice crystal points and use it to pay for this card. So this is actually more expensive than it seems because you have to have those cards on the field to be able to play it. But other than that, 3 mana, 8000 power, Brave, that's okay. Going for all the nice shiny art. We have another legendary, Ramza. So for every category Final Fantasy Tactics forward you control other than Ramza, Ramza gains 1000 power. Like the deleter I showed you earlier, he was a Final Fantasy Tactics category Final Fantasy Tactics forward. And you can pay 3 mana, choose a category Final Fantasy Tactics forward you control, it gains 1000 power, haste and first strike. That's pretty good. Bear in mind you can also use that ability on himself because it doesn't tap him. So you could play that card, you could play Ramza for 3 mana and then activate his ability for 3 mana and he'd have haste, first strike and 8000 power on the turn you play him. That's a very powerful effect, and to be able to play that, and you can play multiples of them to just gain 1000 power. It's a very powerful effect. Going through here. Haven't actually seen Oracle yet. Put Oracle into the break zone, activate all characters you control. Very powerful effect there. Ursula, Queen, Rem, Atomos, Porom, and Palom. Yeah. These 2 combo together with... So, in the previous set there was a Palom and Porom card that if you had them both out and activated one of their special effects, it just dealt a point of damage to your opponent. That's very powerful. Palom's ability here is also very powerful. If a forward is dealt damage, the damage is increases by 1000 instead. Weird that they put instead there, but just assume it means 1000 extra damage. And then Meteor, choose 3 forwards opponent controls, do one of them 6000, one of them 4000, one of them 2000. Has to be 3 different forwards, so it's not that particularly powerful. It's useful for special fodder for his deal 1 damage to enemy. So here we got a couple of things. Commons again. King Tycoon, we saw him earlier. You can search for a Faris or a Lena. Ooh, a new Odin card. In fact, we've got quite a few cards here. Let's go through them. 4 mana Odin, choose a forward. If it has 7000 power or less, break it. And if you control a 0 cadet card, break it regardless of power. For 4 mana, that's very good. There's an Odin in previous sets that costs 7 mana to be able to destroy anything. That's very good. Rubicante. Again from the other card game that I mentioned earlier. If you control 4 or more fire backups, the cost for playing Rubicante onto the field is reduced by 2. When it is blocked, you choose a forward opponent controls and deal it 5,000 damage. Could be anyone. That's a very impressive ability. I like that a lot. Also he's an Archfiend, which combos with a card from a previous set. As is Baha Prisha. When Baha Prisha enters the field, choose 1 forward opponent controls until the end of the turn. Its power becomes 1,000. That's pretty cool. Shame that's only when it enters the field, but still a pretty powerful ability. Okay, and here we have the other dark card in the set. 5 mana, Feral Chaos. Feral Chaos is also called Chaos in all situations. That's fine. He has Haste, First Strike, Brave, 10,000 power. This is the only card I've seen so far with 10,000 power printed on it. When Feral Chaos attacks or blocks, select 1 character you control and put it into the break zone. So that's a pretty hefty cost for a pretty powerful card, but to be honest, wow. That's a card.
It's only 5 as well.
It's only 5 as well. There's a hefty draw of that, because that's when it attacks or blocks. But Haste, First Strike and Brave, I like it. It scares me, because it's such a high cost. But I've seen a lot of people play very, very greedy, high cost plays in games I've played, and I can tell you they usually pay off. So we've got Freya, Summoner, lots of different common cards. I think we've already seen Genesis before, but he's a legendary card. Enter the field, Don frees a card, deals damage, your opponent discards a card. Pretty cool. I don't think we've seen 7 yet, but that's a very powerful ability. Job class 0 cadet forwards you control cannot be blocked by a forward of cost 4 or more. Wow. And you know what? I was surprised, but apparently there's another card with 10,000 power in the set. A light card, again light and dark, can be played with any mana, but you can only have 1 light or dark card on the field at a time. At the beginning of your main phase 1, select one of the following 3 options. All the forwards you control gain 3,000 power, all characters opponents control loses their abilities, or draw a card. That's pretty good. I'm just going to leave that on there for now. Just going to leave that right there for everyone to see. I'm down to my last 6 packs now, but I guess I'll do the next box tomorrow. Obviously 7 power is a massive cost to pay. There are next to no cards that are as costly as it. The only other one is there are 7 cost cards, but there's a 9 cost Bahamut summon, which deals 9,000 damage to 2 separate cards, which is also very powerful, but won't kill this, so yeah. Cool story. Going through the common cards again. cards. Kelga, haste. When he enters the field, you may play a Dawn Warrior from your hand. So I'm guessing that's meant to be the character cards from Final Fantasy V. Or at least some of them. Playing a card from your hand for free is always cool. And you can activate his special attack to gain 6,000 power. It's quite hefty for 6 mana, but with haste, it's always good to get in that cheeky last blow. Again, just lots of common cards. Rem, Atomos, Boron. Heroic Summon. Choose up to 2 forwards opponent controls and return them to their owner's hands. Again, useful for getting in those final blows. Definitely something I would hold on to in my hand before dropping it on my opponent who doesn't know any better. Common cards, common cards. Shiny Genesis avatar. Remember, his name is Genesis in all situations. I haven't seen any other Genesis cards yet, so we'll have to see about that. So another Archfiend card. When he enters the field from the break zone, choose a forward, deal it damage equal to half of his power, rounded up. And you can activate his special ability from the graveyard. That's a really cool effect. I've already seen Sephiroth. And we have a legendary Vivi. That's a nice piece of art on that card. When Vivi enters the field, choose a forward, deal it 4,000 damage and 1,000 more damage for each card in your opponent's hand. Faraga, deal 7,000 damage to all forwards, including himself. Board clear for days. But man, that is a really powerful effect. A really powerful effect and really good art there. I liked it. So more common cards, WRO members. Dawn Warrior card, that combos with the other one we saw earlier. If you have 4 more cards in your hand, he gains 2,000 power, becoming 11,000. If you have 5 or more cards in your hand, he gains Brave. A Brave 11,000. That's pretty okay, to be honest. That's a decent blocker attacker. And you don't need to build a deck around it, so yeah, that's pretty cool. Ephemeral Summoner, Pelennor, Kater, Masked Woman, Kurosame, Odin, Quattro Queen, Exodus, the Judge Sal. Select. Oh, okay. Select one number. Your opponent selects one number. Break all forwards of cost equal to either number. I like it. That's a
weird card.
I like it. It's a fun card. But make sure to let your opponent read the card before they select a number, otherwise that's a bit rude. But also a bit fun. Please note, I do not condone cheating in any event. Just hilarity.
That is hilarious.
And lastly, well, we've got I think it's another shiny Ico. There's a little Ico card. And we've got Brandless the Knight. When Brandless enters the field, you may search for a card named Segwardese or Pelennor and add it to your hand. And for each Segwardese and Pelennor you control, Brandless gains 6,000 power. So overall, quite a lot of interesting cards there, especially the ones near the end, the Feral Chaos and the 7 mana Light card. Hopefully we'll be seeing a few more of those in the next box we open tomorrow. But for the meantime, I'll just leave you with Awesome Vivi. Have a good one.